guys, so this is the tutorial for my Willow bra wraparound style. This is one of the styles that comes with the pattern. There's a few. I have recently done a tutorial for the classic style if that's what you're looking for. I'll link that down below for you. So I'm also going to be running through sort of the lace overlay and how to sew that on. There is a lace overlay tutorial that comes with this pattern, but I've done it on the classic style in the pattern instructions, so I thought it'd be nice just to do a version with it on this wraparound style as well. So in this video I'm going to be going through adding the lace and sewing all these pattern pieces together and applying your fold over elastic and the band elastic to the bottom. I will then be doing another tutorial for the straps at the top obviously, and then sort of the strap around the back. So I've laid everything out and I've cut basically one of everything. How I cut the lace was I basically took the pattern piece, laid the lace over the pattern piece that I'd already cut out, decided whereabouts I wanted it to come to, and then I just cut around the shape because obviously I could see through the lace, so I cut that out. I then took this piece of lace and then matched it up with the rest of the lace, like where the pattern was, and I sort of use this as a pattern piece then to trace around that, or to cut around that with my rotary cutter to get two pieces of lace that are mirrored, so it all looks quite nicely balanced at the front. So you can see sort of the pattern is opposite each other. It looks quite neat like that. So in the pattern instructions it does say to baste your lace to the fabric. So I'm just going to lay it on so all the edges match that I've cut out. I'm just going to pin it in this position to start off with. Now I do sort of recommend hand basting your lace. It is much easier to remove later, but what you could do is put lots of pins in and then maybe just put a row of machine stitches up here, but removing machine stitches is a bit more tricky and it takes much more time, so I often find it's quicker just to hand stitch, which may seem like it takes longer, but then unpicking the basting stitches does take a lot less time. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm just going to hand baste this piece of lace to the fabric. So there we are, I've just put in some really big sloppy stitches in a contrasting thread so it makes it easier to take out later. So I'm just going to do the same for the other side. So now I've got all my basting stitches in place, what I'm going to do now is just sew with a very small zigzag stitch. I'm just going to sew along this lace edge here, kind of just inside the edge with a small zigzag stitch, and I'm going to follow the shape of the lace. So I've got my sewing machine set to a small zigzag stitch, so I've got a width of 2 and a length of 2, and instead of sort of twisting and pulling the sort of pattern piece around to get round the curve, what I'm going to do is just lift the foot up and pivot the work with the needle down, so it'll be staying in the same position, but I can just pivot around like this. So there we are. Now I'm just going to do the same with the other side. So there we are, I've just sewn on both of the lace just along this edge. I haven't gone sort of around. That's the reason why I sort of need to baste the whole pattern piece on, is because now we're going to apply the fold over elastic to this edge, and if this is moving and the lining's moving, it's all going to get a little bit awkward and fiddly, and then you'll end up missing bits out of the fold over elastic. So what we're going to do now is take a lining pattern piece, if I can find the right one. Here's all my lining. So I'm going to place these two wrong side, so the back non-pattern side to the wrong side of the lining pattern piece, and I'm using a stretch mesh so it's a little bit invisible, but then I'm going to just pin these together. Making sure all the edges are matching up really neatly. we are. So now what I'm going to do to make the following steps easier is I'm just going to baste the main fabric to the lining. So I'm going to do this again just in a contrast thread like like I did with the lace. I'm just going to go all over the pattern piece, really big stitches. It's just to keep the two layers together. So both these centre front pieces are now attached to their counterpart lining, wrong sides together. So now what we need to do is apply our fold over elastic along this edge. So I'm going to cut a piece of fold over elastic 2 centimetres shorter than this edge. So the way I'm going to do that is basically just run the elastic along the edge. So that's how long it would need to be, and I'm just going to eyeball 2 centimetres shorter and cut the elastic to there. But what I'm also going to do is, because I need 2 pieces, just to make sure that these are the same length, I'm just going to cut them to the same length before I start sewing anything. So I've now got my fold over elastic cut 2 centimetres shorter than this centre front edge, which is where it will cross over about here. So now what I need to do is decide which side of the fold over elastic is going to be the right side and which side is going to be the wrong side. So I think for this pattern I'm going to have the matte side as sort of like outside facing up. So the shiny side has now become the wrong side of the elastic, so I'm going to put the wrong side of the elastic to the edge of the fabric, so to the inside edge, and I'm going to place the edge of the fabric, the raw edge of the fabric, along the fold line in the elastic. So I'm just going to sort of hold that in position there. I'm going to set my sewing machine to a 3-step zigzag stitch, so a width of 3 and a length of 2.5. Do a couple of machine stitches at the start of that seam before I start doing anything. Then I'm just going to take the end of the fold over elastic and the end of the pattern piece and line those up, and then as I sew I'm just going to stretch the elastic to the length of the fabric. I'm not going to pull so much that the fabric is stretched to, just the elastic, and then using a 3-step zigzag stitch I'm just going to sew along this edge. There we go, get going a little bit, and then off we go. So we're not actually gathering this edge, we're just sort of contouring it slightly to give it some structure. So there's no sort of gathering going on. So what I'm going to do now is just trim back the fabric to the zigzag stitches. So this is an important step you don't want to miss out. If you don't sort of trim back the fabric, and if it's sticking out beyond that fold line, it will create a bumpy edge, which you do not want right at the centre front of your bra. There we are, so nice and trimmed back neatly. So what I'm going to do now is just fold this fold over elastic down, and then top stitch along the fold over elastic, along this, sort of in the middle between this edge and this edge, just stitch all the way down with the same 3-step zigzag stitch. So instead of stretching the elastic this way, which is what we did before, I am just going to guide it through from behind. I'm not stretching this sort of in front of the foot, I'm not stretching that at all I'm doing is just keeping it in position. And then sort of guiding it through from behind. There we are. Nice sewn front edge. That's what we look like on the back. So now I'm just going to do exactly the same with the other side. So yeah, I've got both the fold over elastic front edges done. So now it's time to sort of start assembling the rest of the bra. So I'm just going to do one side because it is then repeated for the other side. So I'll pop that one to one side and then get my side front pattern pieces. So I've got the main and the lining. So this bra is designed with a little step up here in between this seam. These seams aren't meant to be the same length. There is like a little up here. So it is important that you match your notches when we come to this bit. So I'm going to take the right side of the side front and place it to the right side of the centre front. I'm just going to loosely position it there and then turn it over, and then place the right side of your lining to the right side of the lining on the inside of the bra. So inside to the inside, outside to the outside, but then also the right sides together for the lining and the right sides together for the main fabric. So then what I'm going to do is, and this is where it gets very fiddly, is then position these seams so all the bust seams sort of sit together. So obviously because this is the bust seam, it's going to be a curved seam. So it does make things a little bit more tricky. So I've started at the bottom and I've put a pin in there with all the layers together. Then I'm going to go ahead and find the notch, and I've just put like a tiny little snip into the fabric. So I've matched all the notches together for the lining and the fabric. So I'm just going to put a pin there, and then it's just a case of pinning in between so you don't end up missing any layers. So it is a little bit fiddly, but the notches do make it much simpler. So there we go, notches there, matched, everything all together, and then just it will have a little step down that will be like that. Match these two layers together at the end. See if that's where it's all sitting flat. And then I'm going to pop a pin where the centre front pattern piece finishes. Make sure that's in the right place. Lots of pins. Okay, let's sew the seam. So I'm going to stitch this seam with a straight stitch, but I don't want it to be too close together because it might stretch out the fabric as it's stretchy in both directions. But I don't want this to be too far apart. It's almost like a basting stitch, and then it's obviously going to pull and come apart. So I've set my sewing machine to a length of 2.8, and don't forget to back tack at the start and at the end, and remove your pins as you go. So what I'm also going to do on this seam, because it is a curved seam, is just take a few little wedge shapes out of this most sort of curved bit around here. I'm just going to do 3. I think I'm going to start there. Just going to fold it over like that, and then just take out a few little wedge shapes. It just reduces the bowl, which is the goal here. So there we are. You can see that. So what I can do now is just turn these pattern pieces so the wrong sides are together. So we are, I've just pressed that seam. So now I'm just going to repeat the same step in reverse for the centre front and the other side front pattern pieces. And there we are, that's the other side done. So we are done sewing the front. Now it's time to sew the back. So this is where it can get a little bit confusing because it's sort of one piece, there's no closure at the back, but I'm going to walk you through it. So if you take your back pattern pieces, so this one's cut on the fold because obviously we don't need a back closure at the centre back because that's what we're going to sort of wrap around and have with the strap elastic. So what you then need to do with this piece is if you take the right side and match the side seams of your first side, just sort of like we've done before, you just want to keep all your seams hidden inside, make it all look nice and neat on the inside. So there we go, roughly matching. Then take your lining and place the right side of your lining to the right side of the lining on the inside of the bra, and then you just want to pin all these in place, just match all the seams, make sure all the edges are there in the right place. So this can get a little bit tricky, and actually basting the side front main fabric to its lining actually makes this step a little bit easier, but I haven't done that. But that is an option for you, just make it a little bit easier. But it's not too bad because it's a straight seam, it's nice and simple, so it's not as awkward as the bust seam. I don't think you can have too many pins in this seam. Just make sure you've got all the layers in the right place. There we go. So the right side of the back, and the back is a really long pattern piece, so the right side of the back to the right side of the side cup, and then the right side of the lining back to the right side of the side cup on the inside. So remembering to back tack, you don't want this to come undone. Now this is where it gets a little bit annoying that you've put so many pins in. So we are, straight down that seam, nice and simple, straight seam, very simple to sew. So then what we can do is turn these pattern pieces so the wrong sides of the lining are together, and you have a side seam. So the tricky bit comes now when we come to sew the other side, because obviously we want the seam allowances to be hidden on that side of the pattern piece too. So there we have got my lining and my main fabric, and you can just give that seam a press, but I'm going to do them both at the same time in a minute. So I'm just putting my pattern pieces back in the same position as when we sewed this seam. So the front is being sandwiched in between the back and the lining. And what then we need to do is basically just pop this pattern piece in between the two layers as well, but in between the other side seam. So the back pattern piece, the main fabric is sort of sitting across the front with the right sides together, and then the lining fabric is behind here. So I've got all 4 of these layers. So I've got my main fabrics here, so I've got the back and the side front, and then the side front lining and the back lining there. So I'm just going to match all these seams together and then sew this seam. Again, this is very fiddly. So well, this is sort of what it looks like at this point. So you've got your back main and back lining, which is tucked behind these two. It's just hiding underneath there. And then these 2 bits sandwiched in between. So now what I'm going to do is just sew this seam, same as we did before. There we are, I've just graded that seam. Seam sewn and graded, and now it's time to turn everything through. So the first lot of elastic that I'm going to sew is the band. So I've got this plush picot elastic, 12mm wide, just for reference for you. So I'm going to sew that obviously along the bottom edge of the bra. So you need to cut this elastic 7 centimeters shorter than this whole sort of length from one end to the other. So I'm just gonna kind of hold it along, and this is just easier than measuring, just so you make sure you get the right length. If you just literally place it all the way along this edge. There we are. So that's the length I'd cut this to if I needed it to be the same length. That was good. It's almost like that was planned. I've got a join in my elastic for some reason. Okay, so that is where I would cut it to if I needed it to be the same length. So I'm not going to eyeball 7 centimeters, so I'm going to measure it. There we go. 7 centimeters shorter. There we go. What I'm going to do as well to make this easier is fold the elastic in half, mark the centre point with a pin, and then fold again. Basically I'm just dividing this elastic into quarters, and I'm just marking it with pins just to make this easier, just to make sure that we get the elastic sewn on evenly and you haven't got to guess or kind of stretch it the full length of the edge, because I don't think you'd be able to reach the machine. I don't think you'd be able to reach the pedals if you had to do that. There we go. So that's now divided into quarters, just with 3 pins. It's the easiest way to do it. And I'm just going to divide the bottom edge of this bra as well into quarters. So just the easiest way to do it, rather than measuring again, is just folding it in half. And I'm just going to pop the pin in the other way, because obviously the back has got lots of pins. This is another positive of basting this together, so you don't end up stretching it to the wrong point. But there we are. So that's the halfway point, which will be the centre back, and then just going to fold again in half up into the middle to get my quarter, which is there. Mark that with a pin going upwards, and then the same on the other side. So up into the middle. I'm running out of pins. There we go. There we are. So the bottom edge of the bra and the fold over elastic is now in quarters. So the theory is, if you sew the elastic to the fabric and you stretch the elastic to match the pins, it will be evenly sewn on all the way around. So the position you want your elastic to be in, so if you take the bottom band of your bra, so this is the bottom edge, you can sort of see if I'm not flapping about too much. There we go. And you want to take the elastic and place the straight edge of this picot elastic, place the straight edge to the raw edge of the fabric like that. Now the plush side of the elastic needs to be facing up, because it's going to be turned under like this, and then that will be against the skin, so that'll be against your skin basically. So you want that bit to be the plush side, not the rough side. So there we go. So place it like that. I'm going to use a 3-step zigzag stitch. I'm going to use a slightly wider 3-step zigzag stitch than I used for the fold over elastic. So I'm setting it, my machine to 4.5 width with a 2.5 length. So the length is the same, the stitch is just wider because this is a little bit wider. But you do want to sew along this sort of edge here, obviously not going onto the picots and messing this bit up, but just so when the stitch comes down on the left side of the zigzag stitch, you want that to sit just along this edge here. So before I do any stretching of the elastic, I'm just going to do a few stitches here. Just to secure everything. Okay. So now what you need to do is take the first pin on your elastic and match it with the first pin on the bottom edge of the fabric. So there we go. And then just stretch the elastic like we did with the fold over elastic. So no more, you don't stretch the fabric, you don't need to stretch that more than the elastic as well. Just stretch it until the elastic is the same length as the fabric, and then just sew. Might feel like you need 3 hands for this one. Sort of help guide it. If you're using a 12mm wide elastic, chances are it would be quite a firm elastic. So now we've got to the first pin. You're going to find the second pin, and it's the one facing in the opposite direction to all the others. And then the second pin on the elastic. So this is the centre point. So then I'm going to place those together and stretch the elastic to the length of the fabric and carry on sewing. Those pins out, and same again with the third pin in the fabric and in the elastic. Match the pins, pinch and then pull. and sew. So now I've got to the end, or the final pin. You've got to sort of the edge here, no more pins, so just match the end to the end of the elastic and pull and sew. Just making sure all the way along the raw edge of the fabric comes to the straight edge of the elastic. Come off. So there we are. The elastic sewn on all the way along. That's quite a long edge. So I'm just going to trim the fabric back to the zigzag stitches. So because we've sewn close to the edge of the elastic where the picots are, there should be a bit of spare fabric we can get rid of here. This is just so it makes it nice and neat. When we fold the elastic under, you won't have any sort of fabric sticking under or sticking out from behind the elastic on the inside of the bra. Just makes it much neater. So once that's all trimmed back nicely, then you can just fold this edge under, and then you'll just see the little picots sticking out from the edge of the fabric. And then just top stitch all the way along this edge. I'm just going to make my 3-step zigzag stitch just a little bit narrower for the front. And I'm going to top stitch all the way along this edge. There we are, all sewn on and starting to look neat. It's all looked a bit of a mess so far because of all the pins and basting stitches, but there we go, that's all done. So now we need to sew the fold over elastic to the top, sort of back, side front, and then along the back. So again, I'm just going to sort of measure out a piece of fold over elastic. Now this fold over elastic needs to be cut 2 centimetres shorter than this top edge. And the reason it's only 2 centimetres shorter is we're going to create a bit of an overhang of the fold over elastic at the end of each, sort of where the bust seam is here. So 2 centimetres shorter, I'm just going to eyeball it, so it's there, I would say. So to get the centre point of the elastic, I'm just going to fold it and then mark with a pin. This is for exactly the same reason as we did before. I'm just going to do it sort of in two halves. I think that's enough for just this because it is a shorter edge. Then I'm just going to make a halfway point on the fabric too. So same again with the fold over elastic, make sure the wrong side, in my case the shiny side, is against the inside of the bra with the raw edge of the fabric sitting along the fold line in the elastic with a little overhang of about 2 centimetres. So I've got my sewing machine set to 3-step zigzag stitch still, 3.5 width, 2.5 length, and I'm just going to match the 2 pins, so at the centre and then at the centre back on the fabric. Centre point of the elastic, centre point of the fabric, stretch the elastic to the length of the fabric and just sew, and I've forgotten to do a few stitches at the start, there we are. Match the pins, stretch the elastic and sew. Make sure the raw edge of the fabric is sitting along the fold line in the elastic. Take the pins out before we sew over them. And then take the top edge on the other side the edge of the elastic. Make sure there's the overhang as well on the other side. Don't forget the overhang on both sides. There we go. And then stretch and sew. And there we are. So we've got the overhang at the front, sewn all the way down along the back. We can take these pins out now. There we are. All up to the top at the front with the overhang at the front as well. So again, like we did before with the fold over elastic, I'm just going to trim back all the excess fabric that's maybe hanging over that fold line. Oh, keep whacking my machine with the scissors. So once that edge is all trimmed back neatly, just fold the elastic down to the right side of the fabric like that. And then you can sort of sew along this tab as well a little bit. It doesn't matter too much. If you don't sew all the way up the tab as well. Start going about halfway. There we go. So now I'm just going to guide the fold over elastic through the machine from behind the foot. I'm not stretching from the front, I'm not pulling it towards me, but what I am doing is sort of just folding it over and keeping it sort of flat, but I'm not stretching it or applying sort of any tension on this elastic. So what we can do now, and we can start making our bra look nice and neat, we can remove the basting stitches. Now there's quite a few because we basted the lace, or I basted the lace anyway if you're not doing lace. I basted the lace to the fabric and then basted the fabric to its lining so it's covered in stitches. So here we are. This is what we look like at this point. Lovely crossover detail. All the basting stitches have now gone, which just makes it look so much prettier at the front. And you can see this is where we're going to cross over. So do head on over to my next video. I'm going to be showing you how to add all the straps, and I'll see you over there.